Hello, this is Ernesto Burton. I'm the publisher of Military and Aerospace Electronics, and welcome to this week's Rapid Fire with John Keller. I'm here with our editor-in-chief, John Keller. John, hello.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Doing all
Finally,
right. We're here for the second week in a row in this wonderful new studio.
yeah, it looks good. It looks good, and we are getting our first taste of fall, I think, besides. You
Uh,
noticed there's a little chill in the air this morning.
yeah, I think so. I think we're getting there.
Just in time for the Military and Aerospace Electronics September issue. For those who don't get this, I'll just let you know that you can get this by going to the website and filling out an application. We won't charge you for it, but you must be qualified to be a subscriber. Um, and John, I was just taking note of your editor's column. You had a fairly sobering column entitled "A Sobering Assessment on the U.S. Military's Future," and this you basically wrote about a report that the National Defense Panel just released entitled "Ensuring a Strong U.S. Defense for the Future." And this report accompanies the Pentagon's 2014 Quadrennial Defense Review. Now, what did you take away from this most specifically? Because you did have some pretty grave comments here.
Well, what I took away from that is, it's a report from of a fairly wide spectrum of experts. I mean, we're not talking about people who are necessarily on the left or the right, or people who are pro or anti-military. It's a little of everything there, and basically, it's a report from several experts that says that with what the U.S. military is expected to do in the coming years, there just is not enough money in what's budgeted for that. So essentially, it's a call for a revitalization of the U.S. military forces in terms of manpower and especially in terms of technology, because some of the sobering assessments there is where the U.S. military in previous years had really undisputed technological superiority. The militaries of China and Russia and other countries are coming up rapidly, and some of these countries are approaching parity in many different areas. So whereas in previous weeks we've talked about what looks like fairly new Pentagon initiatives really to beef up things like anti-submarine warfare, I'm hoping that perhaps some of that is in response to the sentiment that's reflected in this report and others.
Well, one would think that with a report like this, it's certainly going to raise a few eyebrows and make people take notice in a way that maybe they weren't before, and create a little bit more sympathy towards that budget.
Well, I'm hoping. Now, we'll take a look at the next Pentagon proposed budget probably around February timeframe. Conventional wisdom has it that at least in this upcoming budget there won't be any substantial bump-ups. We'll have to take a look at that. I think a lot of that is reflected in the kind of administration that we have and their priorities. However, I think that the priorities of this administration and perhaps even of this Congress are not reflected in this report. They're saying there needs to be more research and development money, more money going into updating some important weapon systems, ships, tanks, aircraft, things like that. That some of the enabling technologies are starting to erode.
Do you think that some of those priorities, this administration, this Congress, maybe the America in general, might be beginning to change based on what's happening in the world right now, which is, between the Islamic State and the troubles in the Ukraine, is very troubling, I think, for people in a way that's certainly consciousness raising.
Well, certainly there's a lot of hot spots in the world. There's American journalists being beheaded on camera that's been shocking to a lot of people. Here it is Tuesday. It's September 9th as we sit down to this. Day after tomorrow is September 11th. Everybody knows the significance of that date. It wouldn't surprise me, quite frankly, to see perhaps some attack or attempts at attack somewhere in the world. I'm hoping that if there are, it's not serious. But you know, the prospect for a very serious terrorist attack on American soil, perhaps in Europe, perhaps elsewhere, is a very real possibility. And I'm hoping that nothing dramatically bad happens that will really shock people back to their senses, but it really shouldn't take that. You know, the U.S. military, compared to where it was 5-10 years ago, is nothing, nothing where it was. I mean, you look at the number of Navy ships. I think they're talking about in the neighborhood of perhaps 320 ships. I remember back during the Reagan administration, they were talking about having a goal of a 600-ship Navy. So today's reality is half of that goal that was just a generation ago. So things really have changed. I think it's tempting and easy just to assume that everything's all right, that we're going in the right direction. But I think that due to reports like the one that we're talking about, and many others, some sentiment on Capitol Hill shows that the military is in trouble, and they need a lot of attention. And so we'll have to see how that turns out.
Okay, and that let's move on to our first story. Speaking of some attention, contractor protests, you have written, could hold up Navy Cane's shipboard networking program until December. What are the contractors protesting, and who is that? Who's involved?
Well, this is part of a huge Navy Cane's program. It stands for Consolidated. What is it? It's I don't have it right here, but it's the Cane's program. It's to upgrade command, control, communications, intelligence. Basically,
that's Consolidated Afloat Networks and Enterprise Services.
And you got it. And that doesn't really help us with much of a description. It's really an attempt to upgrade the IT infrastructure of the Navy's shipboard electronics. It's a very important program. It's probably long overdue. A lot of the Navy shipboard electronics has become very dated. What happened was Northrop Grumman a year or so ago got a contract to be the Cane's overall system architect. There were 5 companies that were chosen to manufacture shipboard equipment for installation aboard surface combatants, but it's big money. It's $2.53 billion, and inevitably, when you have that kind of money, the contractors who were not chosen for the program have decided to protest. It's certainly their right, but the downside of that is it holds up the Cane's program for at least 100 days. So we're talking, unless the companies involved withdraw their protests, we're talking the program can't get cranked up until almost Christmas time at the earliest. Perhaps it could go even longer. So you have that important program. It's reminiscent of the Navy's Next Generation Jammer program that had been awarded but was protested, and that program was held up for 7 months. And I wonder, I know it's everyone's right to protest, and I know there's a lot of money involved, but it makes me wonder about the national security risks that could come from this. I mean, we were talking about the report, talking about eroding military technology just a couple of minutes ago. Now we have some ways forward, but still, having obstacles put in the way. These big Navy programs, Cane's, Next Generation Jammer, things like that, they take a long time. They take years to get defined, to get the solicitations on the street, companies to bid, and contracts awarded. And even after all that time, these protests just drag things out much, much longer.
Okay, next story that we have, DARPA is turning to the industry for ideas on augmenting inertial navigation with non-GPS technologies. What are the non-GPS navigation technologies they're interested in?
Well, non-GPS technologies, it could be things like signals of opportunity, different types of signal beacons, be they permanent fixed sites, perhaps even temporary. The interesting thing here is, the Global Positioning System, or GPS, is really getting a bad rap, and DARPA and other military services, I think, are coming to the realization that the GPS system is very vulnerable, not only to jamming, but a nuclear explosion in low Earth orbit could destroy or disable all or many of those GPS satellites, such that it could render the whole system ineffective. And also, at the same time, the military, for a while now, has been talking about future military operations in contested environments, and that's a key phrase, for the past, since the Vietnam War and before. Really, when the U.S. military has gone into different operations, it's largely uncontested, especially, at least in the air. I think that military leaders are thinking now that that won't be the same in the future, that it could potentially be conflicts with very sophisticated adversaries, perhaps with technology on a par with that of the United States. And the GPS, on which the U.S. military has relied for decades, not only for getting aircraft and vehicles and ships from point A to point B, but also to guide many of these precision-guided munitions that we've been seeing on CNN and reading about for years and years now. The assumption is that GPS system in a contested environment won't be available, so we've got to come up with other areas, and DARPA is really looking for some innovative ideas. Specifically, they're saying that they do not want proposals that involve inertial navigation systems per se, but they're interested in technologies that will augment inertial navigation systems. That's a laser or fiber optic gyro or spinning mass gyro. Essentially involves gyros. So I think they're going to be looking at radio beacons, all kinds of different things, perhaps things that we're not even thinking about today.
I'll send in my proposal for a sextant.
Yeah, that it's funny. We can laugh about that, but a sextant is a pretty basic navigation instrument. It works, to my knowledge. Navigation officers aboard Navy ships, even today, despite all the inertial nav and GPS and everything else that they have at their fingertips, they still will go out and take a noon sunshot with a sextant. So it's 100-year-old technology, but it works. Certainly it would work in a contested environment. The only problem is a sextant involves a lot of different readings. It involves a lot of arithmetic, the potential for different errors, and it's certainly not something that works in real time. And I think DARPA is primarily interested in navigation systems that will work in real time, fast enough that they could help guide a smart missile or a smart bomb to a target.
Right. Nobody's that fast with a pencil or a spreadsheet.
I know I'm not. I tried to teach myself celestial navigation a few years ago and gave up.
So, speaking of navigation, our last story has to do with laser guidance on the Maverick air-to-ground missile. So Raytheon is going to be upgrading the TV guidance system in that to laser, correct?
Well, it's not necessarily that they're going to be upgrading the TV guidance. I think they're going to be replacing the TV guidance. What caught my eye about this story is, the Maverick missile. This is one of the first so-called smart munitions, I think, in the inventory. It's been around since the Vietnam War, believe it or not. There have been various attempts, I think, to retire this munition, but it works, and the warfighters in the field keep calling for new versions of it. They want it. It works, and so you've got a lot of relatively old Maverick missiles that I believe are optically guided with essentially with television cameras. That's not considered to be as precise or reliable as necessary in this day and age. So Raytheon is going to be switching out those TV guidance systems for the latest laser guidance. I saw a photograph that I understand was the aftermath of a modern laser Maverick attack. I think somewhere in the Middle East. I saw a picture. There had been a sniper, I think, up in a clock tower or something, and they called in an airstrike with a Maverick missile, and it took out. It didn't even knock down the clock tower, but there was sure a big hole in it where that sniper had been.
Wow. Yeah, and you do have a picture of one of these missiles on the website at militaryaerospace.com. That brings us through to the end, and want to let everybody know that the the 4 stories that we talked about today are all available on militaryaerospace.com. If you're interested in subscribing, there's a subscribe link on the homepage. And John, thank you as always for walking us through it. All right. Have a good evening, afternoon, good evening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.